Hey, what is up, you guys? Quentin Loves Trains and Horror Movies 2015, and today I'm going to be reviewing Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers, the sixth film of the series, released in 1995. Curse is often regarded as a low point of the series, and it's not hard to see why, married by a plague of production issues, nearly a dozen rewrites. The theatrical cut of this film is an incoherent mess, jumping between scenes and storylines without any reason or rhythm, and giving a continuation of the ridiculous cult stuff introduced in Part 5. Now, there is an alternate version of this movie called the Producer's Cut that does a better job explaining the cult storyline, and that features more than a half hour of alternate footage, more than including an entirely different ending. Well, in this video, we'll only look at the theatrical cut. If you want to hear me talk about the Producer's Cut, I'm happy to announce a new Quentin Loves Trains and Horror Movies series, 2015 series, The Cut Comparison, that will examine the major changes between different cuts of the film. That film I review, the first episode will feature this movie, and if you're watching this in the future, you can click up there to check it out. But even the theatrical version can't rescue anything, which by all means a bad movie. Writer Daniel Farrens did his best to tie together and reference all the previous Halloween films, and yes, this is the featured film debut of Paul Stephen Rudd, everyone's favorite hot stepbrother slash bite-sized superhero. But neither Rudd nor Donald Pleasence, who returned as Sam Loomis in his final film role ever, can make up for the bizarre mess that had way too many cooks in the kitchen, all trying to write the movie mid-shoot. Maybe the kills wound up alright. Let's get to reviewing this movie. The sixth film in the series opened with a 15-year-old Jamie Lloyd pleading, gasping, and screaming as she was wheeled onto a stretcher down a long underground corridor by masked physicians. The location was eventually revealed to be the basement area of Smith's Grove, Warren County Sanitarium. She was hallucinating that her crazed psycho serial killer uncle Michael Myers was terrorizing her with a large butcher knife. The trench-coated man in black was also visible. Jamie was laid on her back with her arms and legs tied, surrounded by a candlelit altar with burning torches during a mysterious ceremony of cultists. She then was seen in labor delivering a male baby that was immediately handed to the man in black. She cursed him as her baby was taken away. Voiceover during the credits later identified as Tommy Doyle. When Michael Myers was 6 years old, he stabbed his sister to death. For years he was locked up in Smith's Grove Sanitarium, but he escaped, and suddenly Halloween became another word for mayhem. One by one he killed his entire family, until his 9-year-old niece Jamie Lloyd was the only one left alive. 6 years ago, Halloween night, Michael and Jamie had vanished. Many people believed them dead, but I think that someone hid them away. Someone who keeps Michael, protects him, tries to control him. And if there's only one thing I know, you can't control evil. You can lock it up. You can burn it and bury it and pray that it dies, but it never will. It just rests a while. You can lock your doors and say your prayers, and at night, the evil's out there waiting, and maybe, just maybe, it's closer than you think. Since the previous film, the Man in Black over the previous 6 years had kidnapped and cared for both Michael Myers and Jamie, during which time she was impregnated by an unknown man. On Halloween Eve in 1995, she delivered a male baby marked on its stomach in blood with a rune symbol and used on the altar in a ritual. That night, Jamie was rescued with her newborn by Nurse Mary and aided in an escape to save her baby. Jamie feared that she wouldn't be allowed to keep the baby. When Mary left her at the exit, masked Michael Myers grabbed her by the throat, choked her, picked her up, and impaled the back of her skull into protruding sharp metal spike high on the wall. With Michael in pursuit, Jamie fled to a nearby road where she took the driver's seat of a vacant truck. The angry, drunken driver yelled at her, "What the hell are you doing in my truck?" and then had his neck violently twisted around and snapped. She drove off in the stolen truck into the rainy, thundery night. In Haddonfield, Illinois, the old Myers home at 45 Lambkin Lane had been sold by Strode Realty to the Strode family. The young boy, Danny Strode, who slept in Michael Myers' bedroom, was experiencing nightmares of a knife-wielding voice man. He says bad things, and was confronted by his single mother, Kara Strode, Laurie Strode's cousin. The broadcast of a WKNB radio show called Back Talk, hosted by shock jock Barry Sims, was airing a special Halloween edition of its show on Halloween Eve. Sims announced that their next night's show would be broadcast live from Haddonfield at the Halloween Harvest Fair, where Halloween had been banned since 1989, when infamous serial killer Michael Myers and his niece, Jamie Lloyd, and about a dozen cops were killed in an explosion. This was an obvious falsehood. Jamie did not perish in the explosion, and neither did Myers. Living directly across the street from the Strode house, on the second floor of a boarding house, grown-up Tommy Doyle was using a camera telephoto lens to spy on the Strodes. 25-year-old Tommy phoned the talk radio show explaining how he saw Michael Myers when he was 8 years old. He considered himself one of the lucky ones. I survived. Tommy also asserted Michael's work isn't done in Haddonfield, and soon, very soon, he'll come home to kill again, but this time I'll be ready. He seemed obsessed about the Myers legacy ever since he was a boy. That just very that just very much retired Dr. Loomis, Michael's psychiatrist, was also listening to the show in his isolated country home. He was joined by Dr. Terrence Wynn, an old friend and colleague. For a drink, Wynn stressed that he had chosen Dr. Loomis to return to Smith's Grove Sanatorium. Loomis refused, claiming that he had buried the ghosts in a manuscript. Jamie drove up to the local bus depot as she listened to the broadcast on the PA system inside. With the darkened and empty terminal, a sign at a desk read, "Back in 20." Another female caller from Haddonfield Junior College spoke about a planned Halloween rally and the radio broadcast on the campus to revitalize the town after 6 years of band celebrations. From a depot payphone, Jamie called 1-800-YOU-SUCK number to the radio station, and as Loomis and Tommy listened, they heard Jamie weeping and warning of Myers' imminent return. They're coming. Michael Myers. She asked for help, mentioning Dr. Loomis by name, but was regarded as only a wacko. Jamie's uncle relentlessly pursued her into the bus depot's bathroom outside to her stolen truck, and then followed her in a stolen van. After running her off the road near an old barn in the Haddonfield area, where she crashed the truck into a pile of pumpkins, he followed her into the barn, grabbed her by the neck, and impaled her stomach through the spikes of a corn thresher. He pushed her further onto the spikes as she gurgled and choked her to death before his eyes. She muttered her final words to him. "You can't have the baby, Michael. You can't have the baby." Before he activated the thresher's controls, causing the thresher to rip Jamie's insides apart. Only the baby's blanket was found in the truck. The next day, Halloween, in Haddonfield, we are introduced to all the members of the troubled and dysfunctional Strode family, including struggling single mother and red-haired college student Kara Strode and her 6-year-old son Danny, who had both returned to live with their parents in the household after being away for 5 years. Kara's parents included a caring mother, Deborah, and an extremely abusive father, John. who called Danny a bastard boy. He hates Kara for some unknown reason. He believed she had brought bad luck to the household. Also, there was Kara's teenage brother, Tim, Danny's uncle, who was dating girlfriend Beth. Beth lived across the hall from Tommy Doyle in the boarding house across the street from the Strode house. Hard of hearing, elderly Miss Blankenship managed the boarding house. At the Smiths Grove Sanatorium, Dr. Wynn and Dr. Loomis learned that Jamie Lloyd's body had been discovered near Haddonfield. The rune symbol or mark tattooed on Michael Myers' wrist and on the stomach of Jamie's baby was seen at the crime scene, painted or burned in black on bales of hay. Dr. Loomis interpreted, "It's his mark, he's come home." Meanwhile, Tommy Doyle listened intently to his reel-to-reel tape recording of Jamie's radio interview and figured out the call came from the bus depot. Blood droppings from the payphone booth led to the downstairs restroom where he found Jamie's baby crying in a wooden cabinet. He took the infant with him. The imaginative young Danny Strode had drawn a prophetic picture of the Strodes: Kara, Uncle Tim, Deborah, and John, all with bloody knives sticking into them as they stood next to a black object labeled Thorn. In the emergency room of Haddonfield Hospital, Tommy was carrying Jamie's baby when he spoke to Dr. Loomis and introduced himself and corrected his misconception about Jamie being the last of Myers' bloodline. Now that Michael had come home, "No, Dr. Loomis, she's not the last." Loomis was told about the Strodes, now living in the Myers' old house. Tommy took the baby into his care for protective safekeeping from harm and names it Stephen. When Deborah was in the Strode home, struggling with a malfunctioning washing machine in the basement, she suspected someone else was in the house, but it was only Dr. Loomis who claimed that he wanted to help the family. He warned her of the violent force inside serial killer Myers that contaminated his soul. It was pure evil, and that he would return to his childhood home that was sacred to him, with all his memories here. Loomis' tale terrified Deborah with his rantings about the haunted house and all the terrible things that had happened there, and she understood the reason why her husband's brother couldn't sell the house and why they were living there. As she expressed her fears to husband on the phone and then prepared to vacate. Myers stalked her and then hacked up her in the backyard with a hatchet and splattering blood onto her freshly hung laundry on the clothesline. Suspecting that the entire Strode family was in danger from Michael, Tommy befriended Danny and led him and Kara back to his boarding house from safety, although she thought he was crazy. She became more convinced of his sincerity when she saw the evidence for years of his collected newspapers clippings about Myers and the murders. He explained about the runes, symbols, and meanings of Thorn. Runes are a kind of early alphabet that originated in 500 BC. They were symbols carved out of stone or pieces of wood used in pagan rituals to portend future events and invoke magic. Among the ancient Druids, Thorn represented a demon that spread sickness, brought death to hundreds of thousands of people. According to Celtic legend, one child from each tribe was chosen to be inflicted with the curse of Thorn, to offer the blood sacrifice of its next of kin on the night of Samhain, Halloween. The sacrifice of one family meant sparing the lives of the entire tribe. Tommy felt that might be the contaminating force or reason that compelled Michael Myers, marked with Thorn, to commit evil, the method behind his madness. He continued explaining how Myers was seeking the baby, his next of kin, for a blood sacrifice to save the tribe, and why he can't reappear for years after year, especially when the stars are aligned into a thorn symbol. The Druids were also great mathematicians and astronomers, but the thorn symbol is actually a constellation of stars that appears from time to time on Halloween night. Whenever it appears, he appears. Coincidence? I think that's why these people, whoever they are after Jamie's baby, to make it Michael's final sacrifice. Tommy left to seek out Dr. Loomis, warning Kara never to return to her house. In the boarding house parlor where she was watching the classic film on television, The Phantom of the Opera, Miss Blankenship explained the origins of a celebrating Halloween to Danny. A long, long time ago, it was a night of great power, when the days grew short and the spirits of the dead returned to their homes to warm themselves by the fireside. All across the land, huge bonfires were lit. Oh, there was a marvelous celebration. People danced and played games, and they dressed up in costumes, hoping that to ward off the evil spirits, especially the boogeyman. Then she told Kara that her son could also hear the voice, just like the other boy that lived in that house. She revealed that she was babysitting in 1963, 32 years earlier, when little Mikey Myers lived across the street, and he heard a voice the night he murdered his sister. It told him to kill his family. She was implying that Danny, who could also hear a voice, was the next child to be cursed with thorn it if Michael succeeded in killing his entire family. When John Strode returned home, he found everyone gone. Suddenly, the lights inexplicably extinguished, and he laughingly pondered, "It must be the boogeyman." In the basement, as he investigated the cause of the power outage and the loud chugging and leaking washing machine, he found a bloody sheet inside. When he turned, Myers murdered him by stabbing him in the stomach with a butcher knife, lifting him up and pinning him against the fuse box, where he was electrocuted, his face fried, and then exploded. At the Halloween Harvest Fair, Beth was interviewed by DJ Barry Sims in front of the crowd, asserting, "We will no longer let the powers that be control our minds." For years, Halloween has represented everything that's wrong with Haddonfield. But Michael Myers is long gone. There is no boogeyman. Tim was surprised to learn that he lived in the Notorious Myers house, once he occupied by the most brutal mass murderer in history. As a publicity stunt, Sims promised to move the Shockfest show to the Myers house. 10 minutes in that house, and I'll have every fruitcake medium in the country calling in, trying to channel the spirit of that pussy, Michael Myers. In his vehicle, as Sims prepared to drive to the Myers house, he was knifed in the chest from behind. Later, his half-naked body was wrapped in lights and strung up in a tree. His dripping blood was misinterpreted by a child as red rain. Beth and Tim found themselves alone in the Myers house when Barry didn't show. She spooked him by recreating the night of the initial murder. They kissed in the darkened house and then proceeded to make love in Kara's bed while surrounded by candles after showering, and then standing in the front of a foggy mirror. Tim's throat was slit with a butcher knife, and Beth was stabbed to death by Myers, and Kara witnessed through the window inside the Blankenship's house. Kara then looks down and sees Danny entering the Myers house. Kara races over to the Myers house, and upon entrance, she witnessed her son going upstairs into darkness where Myers is lurking. Kara brandishes a fire poker and creeps upstairs after Danny. She discovers Tim and Beth's bloody corpses and then finds Danny in the opposite room. Kara and Danny flee after Michael arrives, and Danny runs downstairs while Kara stays upstairs to fend off Michael. She manages to strike Michael in the head with the fire poker and send him back down the stairs. As Kara goes back downstairs to retrieve Danny, Michael comes to life and breaks Kara's ankle. She manages to hit him in the arm with the poker, and Kara and Danny run out of the house and back to the blanket ship's house, where several masked men appear. The man in black is also there. Turns out to be Dr. Wynn. He calls Danny over, who sits on his lap. Tommy and Loomis are grabbed, and Kara tries to escape by jumping out a window. After being concerned by cult members and Miss Blankenship, who is also part of the cult but is knocked out, Tommy and Loomis awaken after being drugged and find everyone gone. They go to Smith's Grove Sanitarium, where they know Wynn had taken everyone. Tommy and Loomis split up. Loomis confronts Wynn, who credits him for first discovering Michael's evil. He states how Jamie's baby represents a new cycle of it after multiple failures, and wants Loomis to join in on his efforts, entering into a dawn of a new age. Loomis calls Wynn out on his evil scheme and is knocked unconscious. Meanwhile, Tommy searches for Kara and the two children and finds Michael prowling the hallways, having already knifed one of the sanitarium's patients in the stomach. The lunatic dying mental patient spooked him. He who walks amongst us, brother, he's come back. And he's very angry. How does it feel to be damned? Before dropping dead, he then finds Kara locked in a room ahead towards the exit, grabs a fire extinguisher, and starts beating on the doorknob with it. Michael then walks from the darkness into the light where the dead patient was, stands still and slowly turns his head to his left, where he spots Tommy. Tommy locks eyes on him as the banging against the doorknob with the extinguisher slowly ceased. The events that happened in the first Halloween flows back in his mind as Michael and Tommy stare at each other. After a few moments of staring, Tommy chuckles nervously and bobs his head to the left nervously and continues to bang on the doorknob with the extinguisher as Michael begins to walk towards Tommy, not letting him out of his sight. Finally, after a few beatings on the doorknob and Michael coming dangerously closer to him, the doorknob finally breaks off. Tommy drops the extinguisher, kicks the door open very hard, unlocking the door, and charges in. Kara runs out the room that she was locked in with, and as they run out the door, Michael, since he is now in close range, tries to grab Kara but misses and starts sprint walking towards Tommy and Kara as they slam the gate exit on him. However, this time Michael manages to grab hold of Kara's hair and begins to shake her head back and forth after they slam the gates on him. As Kara struggles and yells out, "Oh God, stop!" Tommy grabs a gun-based weapon off the rack on the wall, points it at Michael's shoulder through the gate door, pulls the trigger. Michael falls backwards. Afterwards, they continue on to find Danny and Steven, while Michael is laying down, stunned, moving one or two fingers slowly. In the hallway, they see several doctors, one of them wearing their Thorn cult robe, talking about the genetic engineering testing they've worked on and believe they have come across a breakthrough. Dr. Wynn joins them and they head inside to perform the breakthrough procedure. Tommy and Kara walk into the room next to it, where they find the children. They watch through a two-way mirror as Dr. Wynn and the surgeons prepare to perform an operation. But Michael, now realizing that he was being exploited and used against his will for personal gain by the doctors, interrupts the procedure by walking in with a surgical machete in hand and promptly murders all the doctors except one, who runs away from Michael in the same direction as Tommy and Kara. When Tommy closed the gate door on the doctor, he exclaims, "Please help me, oh God," before Michael grabs the surviving doctor's head and begins to push his head with tremendous force through the gate door, splitting his head in 3 places in the original, but more bloody version before the MPAA forced them to cut it out of the film. The gate breaks off the hinges and Michael walks on the deceased doctor's body as he pursues Tommy and Kara again. Tommy, Kara, and the kids run with Michael in hot pursuit until they come to a locked gate. With nowhere to go, the group hides in a high-tech med lab. Inside the lab, Kara notices some tanks with what looks like to be baby fetus inside each one of them, with a chart underneath it. with the ancient runes translated into scientific letter codes next to them. These are apparently the failures Wynne tells Loomis about. As they told him earlier, I've had my failures, but this baby, Jamie's baby. We are at the dawn of a new age. The failed attempts of Wynne to engineer a new child to harness the evil power of Thorn. As a result, the experiment at the doctors were about to work on in the operating room may have involved Michael's DNA. Michael breaks into the room, and Tommy comes out from hiding holding Stephen, walks up to him saying, "Michael, you've won." He chuckled, then walked forward. "He's yours." As he hands over Stephen, Michael reaches for the baby. However, he hears the real baby crying off to his left, gives Tommy a menacing look. As he slowly turns his head to the right, he grabs Tommy's throat with his hand, but Tommy, in response, stabbed a cluster of large hypodermic needles filled with corrosive chemicals or tranquilizers into Michael's neck, which Michael threw him away and tried to shrug the effects off. He then continues to walk forward until Kara comes out of the corner, beating Michael with a pipe, covering Danny as he ran with Stephen to shelter, which was a small enclosed space that only he could fit into. Michael then grabbed hold of Kara's forehead, and together tightly, using only one of her hands, causing her to drop the pipe. He then dragged her onto a table, knocking items off the table, and almost strangles her to death until Danny shouts out, "Leave her alone." Michael then turns his head towards Danny and locks eyes onto him, releases Kara, and begins to walk to Danny, who is still in the small enclosed space. Michael stretches his arm as far as he can and tries to fit in the small space as Danny screams out Kara to help. Tommy, hearing Danny's cries and seeing Michael distracted, stabs Michael with multiple hypodermic needles near his neck, and as Danny runs to Kara, Tommy yells out to them to go as he began to beat Michael using with the same pipe as Kara used. Dr. Loomis aids Kara's, Danny's, and Stephen's escape in an elevator, while Tommy takes care of Michael so he can try to stop them from escaping. So he can't try to stop them from escaping. Tommy turned to walk away with the pipe still in his hand, but turns back around and starts beating Michael again, but longer because of all the pain he caused to Tommy and Laurie. As Tommy hit Michael's head and body multiple times, green/yellow stuff started pouring little by little from the eye holes in the mask as the screen flashes quickly, showing Tommy hitting Michael and Michael moving his head left and right before the force that Tommy is using to inflict damage onto Michael. Finally, Tommy throws the pipe down, exhausted, and walks out of the sanitarium. As Tommy sat in the driver's seat of the red Jeep and with Stephen, Kara, and Danny, he says, "Come with us." Dr. Loomis says in response, while cracking a small smile, "No, I have a little business to attend to here." In the final scene, chains are heard rattling while the camera pans down to Michael's mask that is lying on the floor of the lab room with a needle next to it and Loomis is heard screaming in the background, leaving the fate of both characters ultimately unknown. That's it. Halloween The Curse of Michael Myers came out in 1995, one of the last pre-screened horror movies. The next Halloween film would be highly influenced by Wes Craven's masterpiece, and in the process completely ignore this film and the two films that came before that. I'm talking about Halloween H20 20 years later, of course, which I'll review next week. Until next time, I'm Quentin Loves Trains and Horror Movies 2015. Please like, share, subscribe, comment below what you think. Make sure to follow me on Instagram and support me on Patreon. And I would also like to give a shout out to Christian Hannah Horror, Nick the Lost River Drive-In, Pizal, Lee Drum Dums, Braden Timmons, Nick Push's Horror Channel, Jake Blaster Production, Bud in the Halloween Verse, Dave McRae, Jimmy Champagne, Zach CZ's World, Mike and Jay, We Watched a Movie, and James A. Janice, Dead Meat. Remember, if you're not watching this video on the same day it came out, then the cut comparison should be out. Go watch it. I hope it's good. Alright, thanks. Be good people.